Hey everyone, here's another video in this series of quick tips for drummers who are new to traditional jazz. Just older styles of jazz drumming, 1920s, 1930s, swing, Dixieland, New Orleans, jazz, hot jazz, whatever we want to call it, traditional jazz drumming. Um, just some quick tips. Obviously, the best way to get into any style is really just to listen to recordings of the greats, but sometimes we find ourselves on gigs and we just have to do the best we can. So I get a lot of questions from people who are new to this style and just want to know some things they can do to fit in better if they're playing a traditional jazz gig. So this series is just meant to be some quick tips that you can pretty much put into practice immediately. So for today, I wanted to talk about the bass drum because one of the greatest misconceptions that I see, one of the biggest, I would say, mistakes that people make when they're new to this style and they're trying to play it, especially with the more New Orleans elements of the style, they tend to play the bass drum in a very busy, syncopated, funky kind of way, like what you might hear from a more contemporary New Orleans brass band, or even like the Dirty Dozen brass band, or something like that. This slightly more contemporary kind of second line playing, with a real busy bass drum. And a lot of people think that that's the authentic way to play the traditional jazz style, but it's really not. That way of playing is great, and it's definitely a New Orleans thing. So all of that should go without saying. But a lot of people think that that's the way drummers like Baby Dodds and Zutty Singleton played, and it's not. The it's not really a jazz style of playing the bass drum. Those jazz drummers, even people like Baby Dodds and Zutty Singleton, they mostly played the bass drum in two or in four. And that's the basic thing. Playing in two, where you're playing two beats to the bar on one and three, or playing in four, where you're playing four beats to the bar on the bass drum. That's mainly what those players did. That's, of course, not all they did. They did other things on the bass drum. It's not like they never syncopated the bass drum or played little, double beats or things. They did. But mainly they were playing in two or in four, mostly in four actually, but it depends on the drummer and on the band. But they played in two or in four for the most part. They didn't do that busy, syncopated, funky kind of New Orleans brass band style of bass drum playing. They just didn't do that. Um, you can hear this on all the recordings. And so if you're trying to do that more brass band, busy style bass drum playing, it's usually not going to go with the groove that most traditional jazz bands are playing. If people are really coming from the music, even King Oliver, Jelly Roll Morton, the bass drum would just be in four or in two. So you can now, when to play it in four or when to play it in two, that can get a little deep. But I would say, if no one gives you any instruction, just a good rule of thumb is to match the bass or the bass instrument. It could be a tuba, it could be a bass saxophone. If the bass instrument is in four, you can play the bass drum in four. If the bass instrument is in two, you can play the bass drum in two. Now that's not how a lot of those drummers played. That link between the bass drum and the bass, it wasn't such a rule back then. So you hear a lot of things where the bass or the bass instrument is in two, but the drummer's playing the bass drum in four. But if you're not sure when to do those things, just a good rule of thumb, go with what the bass is doing. So that's about it. I just mainly wanted to make this video to say the bass drum playing is much more streamlined than you might think, played in two or played in four, and avoid that really funky kind of second line busy bass drum groove. Even when those older drummers were playing very intricate things on top, on the snare drum, around the drums, even parade kind of things, playing around the wood blocks and cowbells, the bass drum was still mostly in two or in four. So I hope that helps. Thanks for watching, everyone. I will be back soon.